The Suicide Squad is nothing short of a triumph. For audiences, for critics, for DC, for Warner Brothers, for James Gunn, for comic book films in general. Except maybe box office wise for reasons we all know too well.
In terms of money, we have no money.
I don't know what I'm going to do if all of these get delayed again. But we are not here to speculate on the inevitable. We are here to talk Suicide Squad. No, sorry, The Suicide Squad. Which for casual audiences, that definitely won't be confusing. And I know, everyone and their mom has already talked about how great this is. How this is one of the best comic book movies ever made. And, well, they're right. But we can talk about it one more time, because it really is worth talking about as much as possible. Most of, if not all of the success of this movie comes down to its architect James Gunn, who is the perfect guy to direct a Suicide Squad film. Or should I say again, the Suicide Squad film, because frankly, why would anyone even acknowledge the 2016 film when this exists? Although, to be honest, without that, we wouldn't get this, so I guess it's actually a good thing that it was a total failure on their part back then. And it's time we ask, is he the best comic book movie director? Sure, you have your Chris Nolan, who made one of the best movie trilogies in general, or the Russos, who can take a story with so many characters and make it work, or Zack Snyder, who is divisive to say the least, but damn, can he make a comic book movie? Or Jon Favreau. But when it comes to taking a comic book and translating it to film, and creating a fun, stylish, colorful, memorable, and unique time at the movies, James Gunn might be the very best of them all. Probably my favorite. And many people, to some degree myself included, thought this would just be R-rated DC Guardians. And in many ways, yes, it very much is R-rated DC Guardians.
Same, but different.
But it doesn't impact my enjoyment of the film or hinder its quality in any way, and just because it has similar ideas and tropes and is made by the same guy, doesn't mean it's the same. And to be fair, Suicide Squad was a direct attempt to replicate the success of Guardians of the Galaxy, and how better to do it than to get the guy responsible for those movies to make one for your own studio.
Outstanding move.
And it is good that they picked James Gunn, because he can completely let loose with this film, and he does. It leaves room for the Suicide Squad to be more than Guardians 1 and 2 were. By more, I mean the R rating, which is definitely justified through the jokes and violence mostly. And Weasel, because no way would you put this in a PG-13 film. Everything is so over the top and in your face, but it works in the movie so well because James Gunn creates the right tone right from the opening scene and has you laughing throughout. I certainly was, along with the rest of the movie theater audience. And James Gunn's sarcastic style of comedy isn't all that dissimilar to mine at times, which is why I think I enjoyed the comedy in this as much as I did, even if they don't land all the time.
I am walking back and forth.
Damn, bro, you got the whole squad laughing.
I don't want to spoil any of the jokes if you somehow haven't seen this movie yet, because if you haven't,
What the fuck?
go and watch it, you won't regret it. And no, it has no relation to the first film other than a few returning characters. I mentioned this because a friend of mine, who we'll call Plug, who I would call a casual, sorry Plug, in terms of movie going and following the superhero stuff, asked me how it works with the first movie and in the DCEU. It became apparent to me that maybe people might confuse this with the first, frankly awful film, and maybe that's why they wouldn't be as inclined to see it.
Hang up. Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. Intel has told us there are at least 7.
Okay, I already see one. Give me. Okay.
And in a time of shared universes and sequels where everything seems to be connected with each other, it feels so refreshing to have something that stands completely on its own. You don't have to watch 20 plus movies to know what's going on or a YouTube recap. You're just going for one fun experience, and that is exactly what the Suicide Squad is. Which is exactly what I was expecting, but then I got even more than that, and that's where this movie really sticks with me. At the center of this movie are the characters, and it's them that make the movie worth watching. You might be thinking, why would I watch a movie with a polka dot man in it?
You fucking pussy!
Well, trust me, you're going to love the polka dot man. To go through each of them in detail would probably warrant its own video, but it's through the characters that James Gunn really shines. I think he's a far better writer than a director, and that's not so much a diss towards his directing, more a praise of his writing. He makes you care so much for these characters throughout the film, whether it's through backstory, or them creating relationships with each other, or just their constant on-screen presence and their likability. He manages to find the beauty and purpose in these misunderstood characters who for one reason or another have ended up in Task Force X. And it's those things that stick with you once the credits roll. The friends that Nanaue makes or the love that Ratcatcher helps Bloodsport find. It's things like this that James Gunn is best at. Who else will make you love a mumbling humanoid shark the way he does?
So smart, me. Enjoy books so much.
But let's discuss the characters very briefly, without spoilers. But judging by how much I talk about some of these characters, you could probably figure out who lives for a while and who dies early on. So just skip to here if you'd rather avoid spoilers. Polka Dot Man. I didn't think I'd come to love him as much as I did, given the ridiculous name and assumptions you might have when you first hear of him. The Thinker. Peter Capaldi was pretty great. That's about it. Ratcatcher 2. Definitely my favorite character, and that is probably the same for about 90% of people who watch this movie. As far as I'm concerned, she and Yelena rule their respective cinematic universe. Wherever that may be, I need to see more of her. Javelin. Amanda Waller. I mean, she's there. That's all she's really there for. Viola Davis is great as always. Savant. He could probably be the 6th Dude Perfect member. Bloodsport. A cooler Deadshot, and his guns that create themselves from these little container things are very cool if you ask me. And as mentioned, I really enjoyed his dynamic with Ratcatcher 2 that developed throughout the film. HBO Max series when? TDK, about as useless as you'd imagine. Blackguard, because I don't think she works as a solo lead, because she's just too much of Harley and she works better when she's incorporated into a team with more normal people that she can bounce off of. That being said, Margot Robbie as Harley is still one of the best comic book movie castings ever, and she's at her best in this film. Captain Boomerang, yeah, he's cool, I guess. Mongal. Rick Flag. Did not expect him to be one of my favorite characters after this, but he was really great. Probably the biggest character improvement from the last film. Peacemaker. What a joke! And of course, Weasel. And let's get into some spoilers, more so related to the deaths of the characters, which is arguably the most intriguing part of this film. Seeing who is going to die. Now I knew all of these guys would die. I didn't expect all of them to die in the opening scene. And it was just brilliant.
Says that could have happened to us.
It could have done, but it didn't.
Right, onward.
As soon as Blackguard got shot in the face, I realized that this movie is really not messing around with the violence, that there really were stakes for these characters, and that it was going to be an extremely fun time. And as the movie went on, more and more people bit the dust, although at a far lesser pace than at the very beginning. They were all executed very well, Polka Dot Man especially. I'd have to say that his was the best death.
I'm a superhero! I'm a motherfucking superhero!
But Rick Flags was the most heartbreaking. And John Cena was a big reason for that. After F9, I thought he'd be awful in this, but I guess with the right director, even John Cena can give a good performance. And the thing about these characters, I cared for them more because I didn't know if they were going to live through the movie or not. That they could legitimately die, which frankly does not happen very often in movies. Sure, from the trailers you could piece together who would live and who would die and around when, but at the end of the day, you just don't know until the end of the film. And that's what makes this movie genuinely exciting, that there are actual stakes in place for these characters. I guess you can afford that luxury when you have so many minor DC characters that you can play around with. It subverts your expectations, it's unpredictable, and it's brilliantly put together. To touch on some other factors, I think the action was great. Like I said, they made sure to extract the full potential of the R rating, and they definitely did not go subtle on the fact that this is a comic book movie. James Gunn isn't exactly the most subtle guy anyway. My favorite touch being the flowers that burst out when Harley is making her way through a bunch of military dudes, or the various text cards that show up throughout the film. They didn't need to do that, but there's no reason not to do that. And it fits Harley's character perfectly. And that's how I would summarize the movie. Why wouldn't they do what they do?
Who knows why madmen do what they do?
It's things like that that help set this movie apart in the ever-growing sea of superhero films. And that it does. It's definitely a standout and one I see myself rewatching over and over again. The camera work, cinematography, colors, everything from a technical point of view was just about as good as it could be. I was actually surprised to get some political commentary from a Suicide Squad film, but I I think they handled it very well in regards to American foreign policy. But I'm not one for looking at the political messages as much, rather the overall message, and I think regarding purpose, this movie does it brilliantly. So thank you, James Gunn, for that. It's always a great reminder that we all have purpose. Simple, but necessary. And it being a DC movie, it's always going to create some sort of Marvel versus DC argument, but I think this time it's a worthy one. Marvel/Disney would never in a million years make something like this.
We don't do that here.
Something this violent and raunchy, they wouldn't even entertain the idea of it. And of course, what Marvel has built is astounding, and DC has tried to replicate it and hilariously failed. But Disney will never make a The Suicide Squad. They will never make a The Batman, and that's where DC shines. They may have the lowest lows, but they also have the highest highs. Hopefully The Batman lives up to our expectations.
Because I don't know what I'm gonna do if it doesn't.
Maybe this movie opens Marvel's eyes somewhat, but I don't think it will, especially since it's not really making much money. But I don't think we can really blame the movie for that. Which is a shame, because although I love the MCU and I like certain creative directions they have been going so far with the new phase, and I'm looking forward to the future, they wouldn't do what DC would. But never say never, right?
Never say never, never say
Even though I said it about 50 times here. But my final thoughts on the film. I've watched this movie twice now and will probably watch it a third in due time. And I loved it even more the second time. I love the characters, I love the humor, I love the way it's written and directed. I just love it and I can't say that enough. But as much as I love it, I can't give it the highest mark, but I will give it 4.5 stars out of 5. Because that is the absolute minimum that I think this film deserves. Believe me, I want to give this film a 5 out of 5, but that wouldn't be right, if you get what I mean. Maybe if it hit a little more on an emotional level, we might be having a different conversation. Well, there it is, that's my review of The Suicide Squad. What comes next for James Gunn in DC after he makes Guardians 3? Perhaps a Suicide Squad. Now that would be a great title. If they do make a third Suicide Squad film and they name it that, you heard it here first, but I am not enough of a DC expert to predict what his next DC film might be. But I can pretty much guarantee you it won't be a third Suicide Squad film. I'd much rather see a third Suicide Squad film from a different director, and that the Suicide Squad can be this franchise where every movie you bring in a new director with a new vision for it so that it doesn't get stale. And there's that Peacemaker show coming out next year, and because of this film I'm now actually looking forward to that, even if I do hate Peacemaker like many others. Point is, whatever James Gunn puts out for DC next, I will be there on day one. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will try to be a little more consistent with the uploads, even if future videos may be shorter or less frequent due to me starting university, but I don't want to stop altogether.
Everybody needs a hobby.
Remember to like and subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, comment down below your thoughts on the film, and I'll see you in a few days with a ranking of the DCEU films.
Why would someone put penises all over the beach?
NANI?!